This is Margaret Brennan, the moderator of Face the Nation on CBS. Less than a week after President Donald J. Trump was sworn into office for his second term, Brennan interviewed his Vice President, J.D. Vance. Here's Margaret's first question that basically set the tone for the entire interview.
Pete Hegseth, it was a tie, bipartisan opposition, smallest margin since the job was created. You had to break that tie. If the nominee can't unite your party, how's he going to lead 3 million people?
So who cares if J.D. Vance needed to break a tie? That's how the Senate works. But ultimately, what matters is that Pete Hegseth was confirmed as Trump's new defense secretary. Suck it, Margaret. By the way, the 3 Senate Republicans that voted against confirming Hegseth were Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Mitch McConnell. I know you're shocked. But wow, only 50 senators voted for Hegseth? I guess he better resign. Of course, if all 53 Republican senators voted for a Trump nominee that Democrats didn't like, they'd accuse them of rubber stamping. So who gives a crap about what their opinion is?
Both the Wall Street Journal and the National Review, conservative publications, as you know, have been critical of Tulsi Gabbard.
Oh, you mean the same National Review that put out a special issue in 2016 denouncing then candidate Donald Trump? The same National Review whose editors wrote in January 2016 that even on immigration, Trump often makes no sense and can't be relied on. Or, Trump is like a man with no credit history applying for a mortgage, or in this case, applying to manage a $3.8 trillion budget and the most fearsome military on earth. The National Review also said that Donald Trump is a menace to American conservatism who would take the work of generations and trample it underfoot in behalf of a populism as heedless and crude as the Donald himself. Gee, why won't Trump listen to them about Tulsi Gabbard?
Her refusal to accept U.S. intelligence findings that Assad gassed his own people, they said, was like a nominee for OMB director not being able to count.
This is a lie. On multiple occasions, Gabbard has said that she believes that Assad used chemical weapons against his own people.
There is no disputing the fact that he has used chemical weapons and other weapons against his people. This is not something I'm disputing, nor am I apologizing or defending these actions.
Do you think chemical weapons were used at all in Syria?
Absolutely.
And so if it was not Assad, who would have used them?
There has been reports that chemical weapons have been used not only by the Syrian regime, but by other bad actors and terrorists within Syria.
She has, however, been skeptical regarding an alleged sarin gas attack in 2017 because according to former Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, there is no evidence. We have other reports from the battlefield from people who claim it's been used. We do not have evidence of it. And as for the Wall Street Journal, well, they're liars too. Ms. Gabbard's opposition to U.S. involvement led her to defend dictator Bashar al-Assad from findings of chemical weapons use. She didn't defend Assad. She simply pointed out that the evidence did not exist. At times in her 2020 campaign, she wouldn't concede that the butcher of Damascus is a war criminal.
Who do you believe is responsible for that chemical attack that killed so many civilians, including so many children?
Here's the issue, Wolf, is what I believe, what you believe, or others believe is irrelevant. What matters here is the evidence and the facts. If President Assad is found to be responsible after an independent investigation for these horrific chemical weapons attacks, I'll be the first one to denounce him, to call him a war criminal, and to call for his prosecution in the International Criminal Court. Make sure that those consequences are there.
This is very clear. If there was evidence that Assad was responsible for the weapons attack, Gabbard said that he should be prosecuted for it. I mean, we entered a war with Iraq based on the weapons of mass destruction lie. So her being evidence-based is why I'm totally on board with her being Trump's choice as DNI.
Does any of this give you pause putting her in charge of the U.S. intelligence community? Yes or no?
No, Margaret, look, these are publications that attacked Donald J. Trump obsessively, but those publications don't determine who the president is, the American people do.
Him.
And Donald J. Trump is the person who determines who his cabinet is, not these publications that I think, frankly, have lost relevance.
But conservative publications don't like Tulsi. Yeah, no one cares, Margaret. no one cares.
You campaigned on lowering prices for consumers. We've seen all of these executive orders. Which one lowers prices?
We have done a lot, and there have been a number of executive orders that have caused already jobs to start coming back into our country, which is a core part of lowering prices. If you look at our slate of executive orders, no, Margaret, prices are going to come down, but it's going to take a little bit of time. One of the main drivers of increased prices under the Biden administration is that we had a massive increase in energy prices. And while we've done a whole lot, we can't undo all of the damage of Joe Biden's presidency in 4 days.
Well, there are a lot of things that contributed to higher energy prices, and there was record oil and gas production.
Yes.
And that's one of the Democrats' favorite talking points. Under Joe Biden, there was record oil and gas production. But it's an over-exaggeration. You see, when Trump entered office in January 2017, the United States was producing 8,873,000 barrels of crude oil a day. 3 years later, we were producing 12,851,000 barrels a day. That is a 44.5% increase in just 3 years. But the most recent data shows under President Joe Biden, the United States produced 13.4 million barrels of crude oil per day, which is only a 3.6% increase over the production high set in December 2019 under President Trump. To put things in perspective, in 3 years and 10 months under President Biden, the United States only increased the rate of crude oil production by less than 3.7%. Furthermore, bragging about record production is meaningless, considering that the price of gasoline hasn't been below $3 since May 2021. In fact, the price of regular gasoline is still higher now than at any point during Trump's first 4 years in office.
Joe Biden did many terrible things to lead to an increase in prices. I agree, Margaret.
Funny how the media is suddenly obsessed with the price of eggs now that Trump's been in office for like a week and a half. But Vice President Vance is correct. The Biden administration did many terrible things that led to an increase in prices, including eggs. Here's Trump's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, being asked about it during her very first White House press briefing.
You mentioned the inflation executive order the president signed, but egg prices have skyrocketed since President Trump took office. So what specifically is he doing to lower those costs for Americans?
Really glad you brought this up, because there is a lot of reporting out there that is putting the onus on this White House for the increased cost of eggs. I would like to point out to each and every one of you that in 2024, when Joe Biden was in the Oval Office, or upstairs in the residence sleeping, I'm not so sure, egg prices increased 65% in this country. We also have seen the cost of everything, not just eggs. Bacon, groceries, gasoline have increased because of the inflationary policies of the last administration. As far as the egg shortage, what's also contributing to that is that the Biden administration in the Department of Agriculture directed the mass killing of more than 100 million chickens, which has led to a lack of chicken supply in this country, therefore a lack of egg supply, which is leading to the shortage.
Ooh, she's good. Really good. Anyway, Democrat activists like Margaret Brennan have an agenda to try and undermine Trump with the American public.
The flurry of executive orders, most of them weren't about the economy. Many of them
were, though, Margaret.
Most of them weren't about the economy. That's all she has, really? In his first week, Trump signed 37 executive orders dealing with a range of issues, including our military, the border, terrorism, and immigration. 9 of the 37 EOs dealt with the economy in one way or the other.
You were talking about bacon on the campaign trail.
Of course, of course.
Those things, when do consumers actually get to touch and feel a difference in their lives?
We're talking about bacon. What about the bacon?
Well, but Margaret, how does bacon get to the grocery store? It comes on trucks that are fueled by diesel fuel. If the diesel's way too expensive, the bacon's going to become more expensive. How do we grow the bacon? Our farmers need energy to produce it. So if we lower energy prices, we are going to see lower prices for consumers, and that is what we're trying to fight for.
You've been in office for an entire week. When are prices coming down? Where was this concern during 4 years of massive inflation caused by Joe Biden? Well, I guess it's different when Democrats ruin the country.
The president did say he wants to do something with an executive order in relation to federal emergency response. He said he may reform or eliminate FEMA. And
I wish
how
that they...
will states who who are lower income states, the Mississippis, the Kentuckys, the Alabamas, be able to do this for themselves without federal help?
Yeah, Margaret, those stupid hicks in Alabama are useless without the federal government's help. But I think the best response to this was from Bonchi, an author on redstate.com. Look at the elitist disgust on Brennan's face as she asserts low-income states simply aren't smart enough without overpaid, useless federal bureaucrats dictating everything. Mask off moment. And as we've seen in North Carolina, FEMA's response to Hurricane Helene was an unmitigated disaster. But yeah, FEMA is vital.
But the states are now going to have to do this themselves?
What? The president is trying to encourage us to reform the way that we deliver emergency response in a way that gets resources to the people who need it.
So don't take him literally.
Margaret is a so-called journalist, yet she is infinitely more concerned with helping Democrats try and undermine Trump with the American public than say, oh, I don't know, investigating FEMA and their massive failings as an agency. Sad, really.
A federal judge appointed by Ronald Reagan, I think you'd agree, has some conservative credentials,
Sure.
Paused the order to end birthright citizenship, calling it blatantly unconstitutional.
So just because Ronald Reagan appointed someone to the bench doesn't mean that they're conservative. Also, calling this judge conservative is a joke. Back in 2008, Judge John Kuhnauer famously sentenced Ahmed Rassam, an Algerian national who was caught with explosives in his trunk and a plan to blow up Los Angeles International Airport, to only 22 years in prison. This was far less than sentencing guidelines called for. Why? Because Judge Kuhnauer says that federal sentencing guidelines are overly punitive, as if that's his decision to make. Thankfully, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals held that Rassam's sentence was too lenient and ordered that it be extended to 37 years. Circuit Judge Arthur Alarcon wrote a scathing 72-page opinion on the matter and said the following: the procedural errors identified in the district court's decision rendered the sentence imposed on Rassam both procedurally and substantively unreasonable. But according to Margaret Brennan, this activist judge's opinion is supposed to matter.
How do you reconcile this challenge to the 14th Amendment to the Constitution?
So I obviously disagree with that judge, and these things, some of them will be litigated. That's the nature of our constitutional system.
And it's going to be litigated, because that's exactly what Trump and his team knew was going to happen when the president signed the executive order.
That's a good one. Birthright. That's a big one.
What about that one in the court? That one is likely to be passed.
Could be. We think we have good grounds, but you could be right. I mean, you'll find out.
Oh, we're going to find out all right, because ultimately, this is landing in the Supreme Court, just like Trump drew it up.
If you are a lawful permanent resident or a legal immigrant who plans to stay, your children, of course, should become American citizens. But let's say you're the child of an ambassador. You don't become...
But that's not part of it.
Well, that
There's
is
already a carve-out
an
having to deal
important
with kids of
principle.
diplomats.
But that's not part of it. She's just so freaking awful.
If you're an illegal alien and you come here temporarily, hopefully, your child does not become an American citizen by virtue of just having been born on American soil. Temporary residents, people who come in here, whether legally or illegally, and don't plan to stay, their children shouldn't become American citizens. I don't know any country that does that or why we would be different.
Well, this is a country founded by immigrants.
Oh, good grief. But now let's watch Vice President Vance destroy the "we're a country founded by immigrants" talking point.
Just because we were founded by immigrants doesn't mean that 240 years later that we have to have the dumbest immigration policy in the world. No country says that temporary visitors, their children, will be given complete access to the benefits and blessings of American citizenship.
Do you personally support the idea of conducting a raid or enforcement action in a church service, at a school?
Let me ask this question, Margaret. Let's separate the immigration issue. If you had a violent murder in a school, of course I want law enforcement to go and get that person out.
Of course.
So what's the point of the question?
Well, we know what the point of the question was. It was to make Republicans look like heartless monsters that would arrest innocent children during Sunday school.
I want to ask you about refugee admissions, which were just suspended by the president. Refugee screening takes 18 to 24 months to go through. They are heavily vetted.
Well, Margaret, I don't agree that all these immigrants or all these refugees have been properly vetted. In fact, we know that there are cases of people who allegedly were properly vetted and then were literally planning terrorist attacks on our country. That happened during the campaign, if you may remember.
And that's correct. According to the Department of Justice, an Afghan national motivated by ISIS was arrested for allegedly conspiring to commit a violent attack on Election Day.
He was allegedly properly vetted, and many people in the media and the Democratic Party said that he was properly vetted. Clearly he wasn't.
And that was a very particular case. It wasn't clear if he was radicalized when he got here or while he was living here.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country, and I think most Americans agree with me.
Margaret Brennan thought that this was going to be a glorious gotcha interview, but instead, JD Vance flipped it around and wrecked her career. You'll love to see it. Anyway, that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time, if there is next time.